Hey now, take a step outside and seize the day.
What's going on, YouTubers, gamers and hobbyists? Welcome to this, which is a video response to a channel called Marksman Gaming, who put up a video a few days ago about who do you think you are, which essentially is asking us, the community, to tell our stories about how we got started in wargaming, in the hobby, what we consider to be the hobby, and just generally the story of how it all began, really. Now, I've told my story a couple of times before on the channel. The thing is, looking back on it now, it's probably not a comprehensive tale in question. So I thought it's nice. Plus, new people come to the channel all the time, and so they probably haven't heard of our stories. So it's a good chance to tell them again. And I like to tell my story about how I got started in the hobby, because it's become one of the biggest hobbies of my life. I can name three hobbies that have really taken off in a big way for me in my life. One was karate, one was music, I playing in a band and live music and stuff, and the other one is this modelling, painting, whatever you call it, and I compass YouTube in with that as well. So I've told my story before about how I started on YouTube and what got me into the hobby, but I'm going to go right back to when I was a kid, because looking back on it, I was always a bit geeky, I suppose, and I was always part of the, that geeky crowd, or that nerdy crowd, the one that liked Dungeons and Dragons. Now, Marksman Gaming talked about his D&D escapades, how he got started in that. And yeah, that's where it began for me, I suppose, was at school. Now, I can remember there being a Dungeons and Dragons club at my school, which was run in the dinner times. So you had an hour, or just a bit less if you wanted to eat something, but a good half hour, 40 minutes of role playing. And it grew to, it started off, I'm getting ahead of myself here already. It started off with just a few of us, literally 3 or 4 people. And I wanted to be on board with this as well. So I jumped in. Nobody had a clue what this D&D thing was. A couple of the people had a couple of the books, and one of my teachers actually ran it for a couple of sessions just to get it running, the club. And he didn't have a clue either. He just like trying to lay it all out for us. But it captivated me. It was pencil, paper, drawing out the dungeons. All right, and I couldn't believe it. It was the first time. Now, this is true. This was the absolute first time I came across polyhedral dice. I thought, what? A 20-sided dice? You kidding me? Couldn't believe it. And then, like, a 4-sided dice? This is getting crazy now. You can't, it just shouldn't exist. But anyway, there they were, rolling these strange polyhedral dice and getting excited and stuff. And I from that club, that initial small club, I didn't learn anything really what the deal was. But one of the other members kind of took me and one of the others aside and said, "Look, I'm going to run my own games. I think I could be a good dungeon master," because we knew there was a dungeon master and us players, but they weren't doing it right in the club at all. But he said, they're not doing it. I don't think they're doing it right. Come round my house. We'll play a few games. And it was at the time that we discovered, my friend, he got me into this book by Terry Brooks called The Sword of Shannara. He said, you really must get this book or read this book, He might have lent it to me. I can't remember. But anyway, I did end up... There was a bookshop in town, which is actually just down the road from where Games Workshop in my local town centre is at the moment. There was a great bookshop in there, and I had a load of fantasy books. Anyway, I found it there, and I remember buying it, and I read this book cover to cover in a few days. Literally spent every waking moment reading. I was just captivated by this story. I'm talking late at night with a torch, even. Just finishing this book, getting it finished. Because he said to me, my friend, he said, I'm going to base my game upon the story of this book. I want it to be based on. I want to use the maps and everything. I'm going to draw it out. It's going to be, and we are going to play, or you rather, are going to play set characters from the story. And a couple of my friends, both the other friends, were into D&D as well, because we were all getting into it at the same time. So I remember turning up at his house because I knew where he lived. I'd gone to primary school with him. I'm sorry if this is like all over the place. I'm trying to keep it as linear as I can. So went around his house, and I think we'd already rolled up our characters previously with him. Like we'd gone around his house, played computer games or whatever, and then rolled up our characters, which he did with us. And then came the day, that fateful evening when we all came together to play D&D for the very first time as our first gaming group, and it was fantastic. I was blown away by this game, which really captivated my imagination. Because D&D was was the first game that I ever played without a board. That to get my head around that took a while. But he did it the correct way it was supposed to be played, and it was absolutely incredible. One of my other two friends was quite well into the game as well, so he knew the rules. He was a bit of a rules lawyer, as it were. So he knew the books that were out at the time quite well, inside out. And this was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I had purchased myself the basic D&D set in that little red box, if you remember. I'd got that, and we were away. That's what got my head around the whole boardless game thing. Anyway, so roll on a few years, we stuck together as a game, and of course the D&D club at my school grew and grew and grew till we had to occupy one of the larger classrooms I can remember now, on the upper level of our school, and there were several games going on at once, and it was really, really good. Great atmosphere, good stuff. Yeah, just phenomenal time. Anyway, our little group outside of school, we really clicked. We really got on well. We ended up becoming really close friends. We used to do other things together as well. We used to go paintballing and whatever. And we just had a great time. Years later, after we left school, we were still playing, going around playing D&D. Of course, the inevitable happens. You meet girls and go off, you have relationships, you end up getting married and have kids and all the other stuff. So one of them moved away. And that was it. I thought, that was my gaming time was over. But throughout all the years that followed, I was still intrigued by gaming. So I thought that was the thing. But I always maintained a high level of interest in D&D. Played the odd game when we could all get together. It wasn't easy. I can remember playing, after I'd left home, and played a couple of games in my very first flat, actually, that I lived in, which was a basement flat. It was really small and cramped, but yeah, I can remember doing that. Yeah, and we did this throughout the time, going into my local town centre, going to my favourite bookstore, which had all these wonderful fantasy books, which fueled my enthusiasm. I would always pass Games Workshop. I'd heard of Warhammer, of course. I'd even heard of that at school. Some people were into it then, but I'd got White Dwarf magazine a couple of times and looked at the amazing painted models in there, and I just thought it was, I can't do that. That's way beyond me, and I couldn't afford it anyway. Imagine getting all those paints. I mean, it's just ridiculous, right? But anyway, it just fizzled out. But whenever I went in town, I would walk past Games Workshop. I would always look in the window, see all these people playing games, rolling dice, getting really excited. And I always thought, that's intriguing. Maybe one day I'd look into it. Maybe, who knows? Anyway, spin on a few more years. Of course, my health is a factor in this now because, I woke up one day with a numb leg. It never went away. I was working for Royal Mail at the time, and this leg of mine just never went away. Loads of tests and seeing specialists and goodness knows what else. And I'm sorry that this is turning into a long video, by the way. But anyway, turns out I have MS. Right. Okay. So my employer, they medically retired me from the job I was in at the time. I was like, okay. I had quite a good financial package from that, which I started getting stuff done on the house, like new windows and things like that. And then I thought, well, I really need a hobby, I need a hobby. So I took up writing again because I'd been into writing anyway, and I love writing. I started writing this story, and it called for a scene which I just couldn't visualize. I tried drawing out. It was a battle scene between, like a skirmish battle. I tried drawing it out on paper so that I could depict the fight scene in my book, and it just wasn't happening. I thought, look, the only way I'm going to do this is to be able to build a model of it, like a little diorama. And I thought, yeah, great. And perhaps, if I could get hold of some figures or something to represent the characters, I could move them around and see what they would see and how, I could incorporate it into my story. Great. The problem there, though, I have no clue about how to do modelling or painting or anything else. I had painted Hero Quest, though, I will say that. That was round about the time I left school, Hero Quest. And I did paint that. I'd bought myself about 4 or 5 paints. Don't even know if it was that many. And I knew nothing about any of the techniques now, although unbeknown to me, I was already dry brushing. That was just something I did. I thought I'd get a better cool effect, especially with the skeletons, that if I undercoated them black and then kind of dry brushed white over the top, and it worked brilliantly. Anyway, that's another story. Hero Quest was great. And we all loved Hero Quest. But anyway, I digress. Sorry. Coming back to further up in the timeline. So I don't know how to build a model, but I decided to do it anyway. And I ended up building this board. But before I did that, I needed materials. I didn't have any materials. I had no clue about how to build a model. I thought I need trees because it was in a forest. I thought I might need some of that, I don't know, grass stuff you glue on to look like the forest floor or whatever. Anyway, I went into Games Workshop. I just went in there one day. My wife had an eye appointment, like an eye test or something. She went off to do that. She said, well, you might as well just wander around for an hour or so. So I did. I wandered past Games Workshop. There was no one in there. And I just decided to go in. And I was like, right, I could get my supplies for this model I want to make. And the guy, I started looking around. He said, oh, you like anything that can help me? I was like, no, I'm just looking for some. So he said, do you play? Obviously, Warhammer. I said, no, I just like the models, and I'm actually looking to get some stuff to build a model. So he said, oh, all right, that sounds interesting. What's that all about? And so I explained about the book and, my predicament or my dilemma, how I was needed to build this model. And he said, all right, well, we've got trees and things. But anyway, do you want to play? I said, well, I don't know, really. How do you play? Well, I'll show you. I'll take you through a game. And he did. He took me through this game, which was Dark Vengeance at the time. Warhammer 40,000 Dark Vengeance. It blew me away. I was like, wow, this is incredibly fun. I didn't know what I was rolling. He said, all right, you need to roll, okay, you've got 6 guys, you need to roll 6 dice, and you get 4s to hit, and all this kind of stuff. And I did this battle, and we were doing challenges, and it was moving them around. But it was brilliant. I had a blast. I was like, wow, that's amazing. I love it. I said, right, okay, I need some stuff to build this model. I don't know. I said, I love the way it's all painted up and that. if only I could do, that sort of thing. He said, yeah, you can, it's easy. Loads of tutorials on YouTube. There's this book which he got me, which I've got somewhere on my bookshelf, How to Paint Threadale Miniatures. It comes with a DVD. You can play the DVD and it'll show you, take you through all the painting techniques there are. And it was that one with Duncan Rhodes doing all the painting techniques on it. So I said, well, I don't know, I'm not that... He said, no, honestly, it takes you right from the beginning. It's easy, and you go up to whatever level you are happy with. He said, I think you'll be surprised with the results, especially with the paints we've got now. We've got shade washes, got this, that, and the other. Anyway, I said, well, I need some trees, and I need some grass, and I need this and that and the other. I said glues, and I need some brushes and a few paints, and I ended up leaving the shop with a big armful of stuff, including Space Marines. It's true. But he said, go away, watch some YouTube videos, watch, I think he said watch Mini War Gaming, watch Beasts of War, and all this other kind of stuff. Anyway, I did. He said, watch the thing called Battle Reports. You'll see battle reports on YouTube. They'll play games. You might pick up how to play the game from watching them. So I did. I went away and I watched these videos. And I was hooked. I thought, I want to do this. This is my hobby. And my hobby... How I got into wargaming, initially my hobby, my mindset was I need something to focus on to take my mind off of the MS symptoms that I've got, which I won't go into now. It's I don't want to bore you with that. So it was a therapy. It was a therapy tool, but my enjoyment from it, it's just absolutely amazing. And I got into Warhammer, and then I got into other games, and I've met some really great people out there. I've even played a few historical games in my time. I'm not a historical gamer, and I take my hat off to all of you that are, including Marksman Gaming, because you've got to be a historian really to play these historical games. Really, you've got to be a bit of a history buff, and I was never into history, years ago. I'm quite interested in it now. It's always with me. It's always better late than never, I'm afraid. But I prefer more the fantastical, the not non-real stuff. So I'm more a fan of the fictional than the factual when it comes to games, because I lose myself in that. And you can see, all the Zombicide stuff behind me, and Warhammer, of course, sci-fi stuff, fantasy stuff. I never got into Warhammer Fantasy, but I do love the models, and I've always loved them. And I've not got into Age of Sigmar. I have a load of the models, and I will get around to painting them at some point. But I don't play Age of Sigmar. I haven't actually played any games of any sort for quite a while now. I've played Zombicide, I suppose, is the game I've played the most. Zombicide Invader. That is my favourite co-op game of all time at the moment. So, and I've just discovered the Alien RPG game, which I'm still into on my RPGs. D&D, which is now on its 5th edition, and it's now by Wizards of the Coast. Call of Cthulhu, which is kind of the Lovecraft horror mythos type game. World of Darkness, which is your supernatural stuff, your vampires, your werewolves, and all that kind of good stuff. And now I'm using Alien to get my sci-fi fix. So that's what I'm up to at the moment. As regards to hobby, my biggest enjoyment is painting. I know everybody has a different interest, whether it's building or playing or collecting or whatever, or the lore. Mine is painting. That's my favourite part of the hobby. And you've seen my videos, I expect. That's what I like to do, is paint. I do different painting techniques, and I lose myself in my fantasy worlds via the painting. But I do get to play. When I got into Warhammer, I had a friend that used to live down here who was into Warhammer Fantasy, and we used to play games. He would play against me at Warhammer 40k, Then I would play him at his Warhammer Fantasy game. You know, we would do that, and yeah. Well, I mean, when we were younger, we both thought we'd come up with some rules of our own for the games, but we never got around to that because it's just too many other games out there anyway with good ideas and mechanics. Why try and come up with your own? Might do one day, who knows? But yeah, that's another video altogether. And I'm really sorry, this video has really gone on, hasn't it? I've really banged on, but that's how I got into it. That's how I started. I suppose the 6 years ago thing, that was when I was kind of diagnosed, and that was really my YouTube hobby. But I do class YouTube as a part of this hobby, though I could class YouTube as a part of any hobby if I wanted to document it. If I wanted to document my music or whatever, or my book collections, or, you know, whatever it might be about, or how to do cooking, I'd still class YouTube as part of that hobby because that's what I'm doing. So there you are. That's how I got into it. And of course, when I did get into it, I was lucky enough to get access to our spare room in the house at the time. You know, my wife said, well, you have the spare room, and, you know, do your hobby from there. But of course my hobby grew with me. I decided to use my redundancy medical retirement package to have my studio built, which is what I'm sat in now, of course. And I love it. It's my sanctuary, it's my haven, it's where I've got all my stuff. Well, apart from some books I got at home, but yeah, I just absolutely love it. And of course, with it being in my garden, you know, I'm not affected by the lockdown, so I can come out in here and do that. So yeah, boy, it's all good. Thank you. I'm going to say thank you so much if you are still watching. If anybody is still watching at this point, my goodness, you're a trooper. You really are. But thank you. That's my story. And now I just love the hobby. I love anything wargaming related, tabletop gaming related, painting related, building related. I'm not the biggest fan of terrain making, but, you know, I do it. I do try. I prefer smaller projects than some of the big projects that the likes of the big boys do. They do like whole tables and massive dioramas. That's not me. I'm not that guy. So I just like a decent table to play my miniatures on. So, you know, I've got a couple of mats that I can use as well. I've got the Realm of Battle board I can set up sometimes. I've got my, actually, you can see there, slant up against the window there, first table I ever built. And I built it one summer, you know, with sanded and paint, and that was my first proper Warhammer table. So yeah, so that's me. Thanks ever so much for watching. I will close what I usually do on my videos. I say, remember, all brushes lead to war, because it is actually my logo, really. It's part of my saying. You probably can't read that, I don't know. But all brushes lead to war, including airbrushes. Stay safe, be well, be kind, and I will see you on another video perhaps. And I won't go on. Bye.